The sun sinks low on the horizon as you board the ferry headed across the lake to Esbury. As you set foot on the boat, the ferryman greets you with a wide smile and a cheery wave. He stands by the gangplank as you pass, welcoming the other passengers as he removes his cap to scratch at his balding head. His pudgy figure fills his well-worn suit. He looks a little awkward, but he seems a rather pleasant sort. Leaving the man behind you, you take a seat toward the prow, eyes fixed on your destination. Hello and welcome. I am Scrapperlock, and this is Call of Cthulhu solo gameplay. Today, I am going to begin playing Alone Against the Tide, a solo adventure for one character in Call of Cthulhu. These solo adventures are like choose-your-own-adventure books from years ago, where you make decisions from a small multiple-choice set of options, and then you go to a paragraph that's numbered and find out what happens next. Today we will be playing a pre-generated character that comes with the Alone Against the Tide module that was published by Chaosium. His name is Ellery Woods. He is listed as a professor. It doesn't say of what, but his top skills are archaeology and anthropology, so we can assume he is an Indiana Jones-style archaeologist. He is a 40-year-old male who lives in Arkham and was born in Boston. His characteristics are a 50 strength, a 60 constitution, a 50 size, a 60 dexterity, a 40 appearance, an 80 education, a 70 intelligence, and a 50 power. He has 50 sanity points. He has 11 hit points, 10 magic points, and we rolled up a 50 luck. You roll 3d6, multiplied by 5. I rolled a 10, so he has 50 luck. His signature skills are anthropology, which he has a 60 in, archaeology, which he has a 70 in. He has a 60 credit rating, so he's quite wealthy. He's got a 50 dodge, a 50 brawl, a fighting. He has a 50 in library use and locksmithing, a 50 in psychology and in spot hidden, and a 50 in desert survival, probably from all of the archaeological digs he's been on. He doesn't have many possessions. He's wearing a suit and a cap. He's got a briefcase with a research manuscript that he's been working on for some time, and a change of clothes and some toiletries, and he has $300 cash in his pocket. And so now what we're going to do is begin the adventure Alone Against the Tide. You settle into a seat with your thin briefcase resting on your lap. You notice that the rest of the passengers are likewise getting comfortable for the short trip across the lake. Glancing around you, you catch sight of the ferryman entering the cabin. As you sit patiently and wait for the engine to come to life, you listen to the sounds of idle chatter around you. You look out across the water and notice a thin fog beginning to form over the surface of the water as the temperature drops with the approach of night. After a few minutes, you hear the engine sputter into action and feel the ferry launch forward. The conversations around you continue as the ferryman joins you all on deck. You can't help overhearing most of the talk, though it's surprisingly banal. There are almost a dozen passengers on the ferry. Most of them are simply looking to spend their money during the weekend in Esbury and to enjoy the various shops and leisure activities the lakeside town has to offer. Many of the passengers seem to come from money, as is common in Esbury. You notice a strange look from one of the women in the group. She has a full figure and brown hair and eyes. She seems to be looking you over, admiring your features. The woman clearly sees something in you that she likes. Perhaps it's your looks or a glint of intelligence in your eyes. She gives you a sly wink before turning back to her companions. You likewise turn your attention to the rest of the passengers. Sitting apart from the general crowd are two men in dark, well-tailored suits, whispering quietly to each other. They have unamused expressions on their faces, as if They don't seem pleased to be here. Perhaps they're on business. Noticing that you're sitting alone, the ferryman approaches you and stands over you with his characteristic smile. You notice he's missing a tooth in the upper left corner of his mouth. His eyes are bright as they light upon you. "Good afternoon. You look a bit lonely there, friend. What brings you to Esbury?" You mention the passing of a distant colleague in Esbury, and how you've been sent by Miskatonic University to recover his work and bring it back to the university. The man sighs and nods slowly. "You mean Professor Harris. Real shame what happened to him. Always seemed like such a nice man. Officer Powell says they're still cleaning up the mess at the professor's place. But some of the more valuable bits will probably be at the estate sale tonight, if you're really wanting at it." The man looks down at his hands for a moment, and then back at you as he extends one your way. "Anyway, I'm Lance Sanford. Pleased to meet you, but I wish it were under better circumstances." We can now inquire about Professor Harris, inquire about Officer Powell, ask him about himself, ask about the estate sale, or pass the time by waiting. Let's ask about Professor Harris. After all, that's what we were sent here to find out. The ferryman raises a questioning eyebrow at you. "Professor Harris? I can't say much, really. I didn't know him all that well, but he seemed like a nice guy. I was sad to hear that he died." You gently press for more information about his death. Sanford frowns and answers, "Officer Powell says it's suicide. I'm inclined to believe him, but Professor Harris seemed happy enough to me. More than content to relax in Esbury like anyone else. In between his studies, of course. Ancient Indian history, I think it was. I had coffee with the professor a few weeks ago, and he talked my ear off about it. I couldn't understand half of what he said, but he was quite excited by whatever it was." You exchange a few more pleasantries with Sanford before he goes to finish guiding the boat into port. You pass the time in casual conversation with the other passengers and in observing the scenery. You note the tall pines and the sloping hills along the lake shore around Esbury. These features and the small town beyond are just visible through the growing mist, but squinting helps you make them out to your satisfaction. In time, you arrive on the pier at Esbury, grateful to be off the water. You take your first steps onto the pier with the rest of the ferry passengers, trying to get your land legs once again. The passengers still chat as they walk off to their destinations. You note one last little flirty wink from the full-figured woman as she struts along confidently behind the woman accompanying her, and you feel the two dark-suited men push past you at a brisk pace, nudging you out of their way. Sanford gives you one last wave and a smile as he begins tending the old rust-stained boat that is his pride and joy. The last light of the sun is fading, and the fog is growing thick on the water now. The night is still young, but you would rather not be wandering around in the dark and fog of a town you are unfamiliar with. Taking in your surroundings, you see a sizable crowd jockeying for entrance into a lavish, modern-looking building along the lakeside. A folding sign sits out front, illuminated by a lantern. The words, "Estate Sale Tonight," are written on it in large, bold letters. While this seems to be the main attraction, you could also seek out somewhere to stay for the night and set about your work in the morning. Let's go to the estate sale, because we're here to find out what's going on there and possibly acquire some information and items for the university. Pushing through the crowd, you make your way toward the estate sale. Judging by the number of people packing into the dance hall, this seems to be quite an event. Most of the people here are well dressed, with conspicuous amounts of jewelry and designer clothing on display. You see a broad-shouldered man in a policeman's uniform standing by the door. He has a scarred yet clean-shaven face and a baton at his side. His brow is furrowed in a serious expression, and he watches the commotion through narrowed eyes. As you mingle With the assorted academics and collectors, you notice a few other faces that stand out in the crowd. Most immediately, you spot a man in flowing orange robes with tawny skin. He seems more than a little out of place and is garnering some odd looks from the other guests. Glancing around further, you happen to notice the two dark-suited gentlemen from earlier standing in a corner toward the front of the room, talking to a young, dark-haired man in a dated yet elegant long coat. He is of slight build and has rather sharp features. A thin wisp of mustache hangs beneath his nose. Most noticeable, though, is the rather attractive young woman standing on stage at the front of the room next to a bespectacled old man. Long black hair cascades down her shoulders, accentuating her pale features and complementing her formal black dress. Occasionally, she and the other gentlemen peek at objects hidden beneath white sheets, the sale items waiting to be displayed. We now have several choices. We can mingle with the crowd of guests. We can speak to the officer at the back of the room. We can approach the man in orange. We can introduce ourselves to the dark-suited men. We can make our way toward the stage and the woman, or we can leave the hall. So let's mingle with the crowd. Rather than single anyone or anything in particular out, you feel it would be best to use your time to get a general impression and speak to multiple guests to get their points of view. Hearing the talk around the room, you come to understand that most of the people who have gathered here are merely treating this as a social event. However, there are a fair number of academics and collectors in attendance as well. Judging by the relative wealth of the townsfolk, you imagine that there will be a lot of bids placed on the items. While walking among the guests, you happen to notice a pair of men conversing in hushed tones. They seem to be trying to avoid being overheard, but a keen ear might be able to catch what is being said. So now we get to make a listen roll and see if we succeed. So Ellery Wood's listen is 20. So we don't have a high probability of doing this. You have to roll under the score on die 100. And we get a 69, so we failed. We strain our ears to overhear the huddled pair's words, but the noise of the conversations around the room drowns out what is said. So now we have begun gathering information on Esbury, and we can do some more investigating. So we get to choose a total of 3 options from the list, one of which is mingle with the crowd, so we've already done that. So we get 2 more options. I think next I would like to talk to this strange person in orange. You approach the strange man. He seems well-traveled and weary, and his long orange robes are a stark contrast to the fine suits and dresses of the New England financial elite. He seems decidedly out of place. You open your mouth as if to speak and find him staring intently at you. Now we can make an anthropology roll. Now this is our strong suit. We have a 60 in anthropology, so let's see if we can succeed. We get a 58, so we barely made it, but we did succeed. You recognize the man's style of dress to be that of a Buddhist monk. You bow a customary greeting, to which the monk smiles and returns the gesture before speaking in a heavily accented but fluent English, and I will not attempt the accent. "It is good to see one here with such respect for our customs. I am Banyu," he says. His expression turns into a frown as he makes a sweeping gesture to the rest of the room. "The rest here seem only to seek profit from my culture. Selling the items of my ancestors is most shameful." You respectfully question why he would come such a long way to witness such a thing, and he sighs before turning back to you. "I have come with what money my temple could gather, so that I might save a certain few artifacts, ones that your Professor Harris stole from my temple in Sarnath when he came to visit some years ago." The monk seems troubled and falls silent. He bows a farewell, and you take your cue to leave. We can now do one more other thing for investigating. Let's make our way to the stage and talk to the widow. You make your way to the stage, navigating around the many guests in the hall. Your eyes lock firmly on the woman, and hers rise to meet yours as she looks up from peeking at one of the hidden objects. She stops what she's doing as you approach, and a smile appears on her lips as she notices that she's caught your eye. She rests her left hand on her hip as you come to stand at the foot of the stage. The old man behind her continues his inspections, either unaware or uncaring that you've come to distract them. The woman leans toward you over the edge of the stage. You can see her makeup has been painstakingly applied despite her status as a recent widow. You clear your throat as you meet her gaze and promptly introduce yourself. She extends her hand formally to you. "Well, aren't you a new face in town?" she teases. "We get those quite a bit here. No doubt you plan to bid on some of my late husband's things. Good for both of us, I say. Just be sure to give a good price for little old me, all right?" She winks slyly at you. You realize that now would be a good time to get some more information from this woman who might be the most well-informed regarding your interests. She certainly seems like the flirty sort and would probably respond well to more of the same. So now we get a chance to make a charm roll. We're not great at charm. Our charm is only 30, but we'll try. And we get a 43, so we failed to charm her. You manage to smile and stumble through a compliment, and the woman laughs. "Oh, my. Well, aren't you the nervous sort? Don't know what to say to a pretty woman like me, eh? That's quite all right. I wouldn't have it any other way. You're welcome to stay for the sale. I might like you better as a buyer." She winks and turns around, walking back to her place on stage. Now we've exhausted all of our other possibilities, so we will proceed with the auction. The murmuring of the crowd dies down, and people begin to gather around the stage as Amelia and the older gentleman call everyone to attention. The widow strides confidently to the front of the stage, where the lights are centered. She flashes a broad smile at the crowd and begins to speak. "Good evening, everyone. I'm so glad you could all make it tonight. As you know, my husband recently passed, and, well," at this point, Amelia begins to tear up theatrically, so much so that her makeup begins to smear. She produces a handkerchief to dry her eyes before continuing. "Well, I'm very upset. I miss my poor William very much, and I don't know what I'll do without him. And that's why I've brought you all here tonight. I hope you can find some use for this collection, and I knew that he would be happy to see his things going to those who value them highly. I hope you will show this poor widow a kindness by finding something you like. But now let's begin. I'll leave the auction to Mr. Warren." With her opening statement complete, Amelia moves to stage left and allows the bespectacled older man, presumably Mr. Warren, to take center stage. He clears his throat before speaking. "Tonight we have 6 very ancient and valuable items for sale from the estate of Professor William Harris. Though exceedingly strange, I have deemed these items to be authentic to the best of my ability. I have placed a ballot box, slips of paper, and a pencil on each of the 6 tables next to the item for sale. If you wish to bid on an item, simply write your name and the amount you are willing to pay for it on a slip, and then place it in the box. The item will be sold to the highest bidder. All of the proceeds will go to the wife of the deceased." With that, Mr. Warren moves to reveal the gathered items. Mr. Warren approaches the first table and removes the cloth covering to reveal a pair of clay cylinders covered with strange etchings. They are small and seem quite fragile, with large cracks running down the sides. Mr. Warren proceeds to the next table and likewise uncovers the item in question. This one is significantly larger and more ornate. It appears to be some sort of an altar or reliquary, heavily decorated with yellow-green gemstones. However, there is one similarity with the first item, the presence of the same strange written characters, though these ones seem to have been painted on. The scholar turns to the next item in question and displays it for all to see, a decorated crown of solid bronze, wrought with the image of a Hindu god. The next item is certainly the most mundane, a large, thick, leather-bound journal that appears well-worn and beaten, with several loose papers jammed in between the pages. Mr. Warren senses the confusion of some members in the crowd and clarifies that the notebook is the assembled personal works of Professor Harris. The item that follows the journal is a well-preserved ceremonial robe of a Brahmin priest. The cloth is pure white. The last item is perhaps the strangest of all. It is a small statue or idol, presumably of one of the many deities of ancient India, made from a blue-green stone in the shape of a rather grotesque lizard-like creature. The craftsmanship is crude and gaudy, so much so that it appears fake. People begin moving among the items, looking them over and conversing quietly. We now can make either an appraise or an archaeology roll. Now, we only have a 5 appraise, but we have a 70 archaeology. So let's go ahead and roll our archaeology. And we get a 21, so that would actually be a hard success if you get below half the number, but it doesn't ask us for that, so we just succeeded. You examine the items with a trained eye. The crown and ceremonial robe are obviously authentic and typical of what you would expect. They're in great condition and would certainly fetch a good price, though they are no rarer than any other antiquity. Likewise, Professor Harris's journal seems like it would be of value to a scholar, though a few delicate cursory page turns show that it contains personal accounts and travelogues as well as historically relevant information. This is likely a good source of information about Professor Harris himself. However, the other items present a noticeably different air. The altar and clay cylinders bear a similar script, and both show comparable signs of aging and wear. Given this, they are unlikely to be fabrications, but they are also unlike more traditional finds from ancient India. A close inspection of the lizard idol leads you to believe that it is likewise verifiably authentic, though the workmanship is strange and unnatural, and clearly nothing like anything you've seen from India or elsewhere. It doesn't bear any signs of work from modern tools or influence of modern styles either. You notice that you're not the only one looking the items over with such interest. The monk appears to be closely scrutinizing the stranger items as well, and the dark-suited gentlemen from earlier seem to have taken a liking to the curious idol. Apart from this, various other guests wander around the tables, occasionally fixing on one in particular. There are many guests and a fair number of bids being placed. If you would like to bid on the items, now is the time. The way this works is we can bid on something, and then it will lower our credit rating for future bids. So the most important thing comes first. And I feel like the most important thing is probably the journal, because that's going to tell us stuff. So let's try to bid on the journal first. You feel that the information in the journal is essential to your interests, and you cannot help but make a bid. You place your paper with the others in the hope that Mr. Warren calls your name when the accounts are compared. So now we make a credit rating roll. Now, Wood has a pretty good credit rating to start with, so we have a chance at this. We have a 60. And we get a 58, so we just made it. So we feel that the knowledge in the pages of the journal could very well prove essential, and we offer a price that is more than fair. Sure enough, Mr. Warren calls your name and presses the leather-bound tome into your hands. So we reduce the credit rating by 2 percentiles, which isn't much, basically 2 points. We go down to a 58. Now, why'd they call it percentiles instead of percent? Because I think they want to make sure people didn't try to take 2% of 60%, which would be awkward and confusing. So now we can make another roll. If it's only going to reduce it by 2, we've got a lot of credit, so we can actually try a lot of these things. I think the next thing I want is the strange idol. Something draws you to the curious idol, and you feel compelled to make a bid. You notice that you're not alone in this, as the monk and one of the dark-suited men both place bids of their own into the box. You hope yours is high enough. So now we make a credit rating, but we need to succeed at extreme difficulty. So that's 1/5. So we don't have a good chance at this. Our credit rating's 58. An extreme success would be an 11. Now, if we get really close, I might use luck, but let's see. No, 35. We could use luck for this, but it would drain almost all of our luck, so we're not going to do that. So we failed that bid. Though you put a sizable bid in for the idol, a truly outrageous sum is called, easily twice what you offer. Mr. Warren squints hard at the paper before calling out the staggering price and an unfamiliar-sounding name, Banyu. Of course, we've met this guy. Confused whispers break out as the orange-robed monk collects the statue with a look of excitement on his face. So we've now made 2 bids. We can keep bidding, as far as I understand. So let's try the altar. You decide a fair bid for the gemstone-studded altar and submit your offer. Not long after, Mr. Warren empties the ballot box and begins sifting through. So now we have to do a hard difficulty credit rating. That's a 29. We get a 52, so we failed that bid as well. We don't get the altar either. Mr. Warren takes his time mulling over the names and figures before calling the name of Dexter James. One of the dark-suited men from earlier comes forward to claim the altar. Now we can try the clay cylinders. You write a reasonable bid for the pair of clay cylinders and place it in the box. Shortly after you do so, Mr. Warren clears the box and begins checking bids. So again, this is another hard difficulty. So it seems like the journal was the easiest one to get. So we have 29, and I got an 85. So we failed that one. Though you wished to buy the curious clay cylinder, someone else placed a higher bid. You hear Mr. Warren announce the name Arthur Duncan and see one of the dark-suited pair. So now we know the names of the 2 dark-suited men. So we have bid on the altar, the cylinders, the journal, and the strange idol. So what's left is the ceremonial robe and the gold crown. So let's go ahead and bid on them. We may as well. Gold crown. You decide to bid on the gold crown and affix your name and a suitable price to a slip of paper which finds its way into the box. You wait patiently for Mr. Warren to announce the highest bidder. And now this is a straight regular credit rating roll. So you have a shot at this. It's a 58. You get a 14. Well, I wish I'd rolled that earlier. So we get the gold crown. You pay a considerable sum, but the Indian crown is now yours. You smile with satisfaction and you tuck the bronze headpiece into your briefcase. So our credit rating is again lowered by 2 points. So it's now down to a 56 from 60. So it's not too bad. We haven't lost a lot. And now the final thing to bid on is the ceremonial robe. Yeah, let's go ahead and try it. We might as well. The ceremonial robe catches your eye, and you settle on placing a bid. You sign your name to the paper with a realistic price and put your submission in with the rest. You wait for Mr. Warren to call out the robe's winner. And again, we make a straight credit rating roll. We have 56, and we get a 34, so we succeeded again. The Brahmin robe is yours. Mr. Warren spent more than a few minutes looking over the offers, but ultimately it was your name he called. You claim your prize and fold it away into your briefcase for safekeeping. So we now have 3 items that we've acquired. Harris's journal, a gold crown, and a Brahmin robe. Now, whether those things are going to be useful later, we'll just have to see. So the auction is now over. We've bid on everything we could. And I think this is a good place to stop because it's been about a half an hour. Until next time, I am Scrapperlock, and this has been Solo Call of Cthulhu, Alone Against the Tide.